Hello and welcome back, and just before we start today's review, I think it's worth highlighting that you need to get in my headspace to understand I'm going into this review with an ever so slightly different point of view. I've talked about NASes a lot, all around me, but this thing has the potential to be the best NAS I've ever talked about. It ticks so many boxes and includes so many bits of hardware and so many features that I've always wanted that have been spread across different systems that I genuinely want this to be the best NAS ever. And if it isn't, I'm going to toss this table in the air. So right now, join me in the review of the QNAP TBS-h574TX. By the way, I hate that name. I hate it. So let's start this review positive, shall we? So, that rather petulant introduction aside, why do I think this has the potential to be one of the best NASes I've ever talked about, if not the best NAS ever? Well, a few things. Number one, 2023 and 2024 saw an enormous boom in the popularity of flash NAS solutions. These are NASes that are specifically targeted to utilize SSDs, but moreover, and more important than anything, M2 NVMe SSDs. These are SSDs that take advantage of PCIe performance numbers and therefore allow a huge improvement on what storage, hard drive bays and traditional starter SSDs could provide in terms of throughput, both inside and out. And last year we saw popular SSD solutions from QNAP and indeed ASUS with their Flash Store series, providing affordable SSD optimized solutions for the mid-tier market, the fully featured, the prosumer. This is by far the best equipped example of that, and as I say, has the potential to be the best desktop flash solution out there in the market today. But a little more about the specifications and this device. We'll go into the unboxing in a second. This device rocking out the gate with either an i3 or an i5 13th generation Intel Core processor. Also rocking out the gate with DDR5 memory there inside. On top of that, it arrives with Thunderbolt 4 connectivity. A couple of Thunderbolt 4 ports there, allowing you to directly connect with your Thunderbolt 4 or indeed Thunderbolt 3 USB Type-C system for direct access, for editing, for more, whatever you want to do with it really. Alongside that, it's got 2.5 GBE and 10 GBE, but moreover than anything else, it takes advantage of E1S storage media, which is not unlike M2 NVMe storage, as mentioned earlier on, but allows for larger capacities, bigger casings, but moreover, hot swapping. Much like hard drives where you can pop a drive in and out and rectify or improve or expand an existing RAID, this system allows you to do it with M2 NVMe's. Up until now, if you tried to do that with M2 NVMe's, pull out a drive, pop in another one, the system would crash, the system would fall over, and it would be incredibly detrimental to the NAS system or indeed any connected clients. Hot swapping allows you to mix and match drives as you go in, take out an old one, pop in a new one, and allow it to keep running and allow people to access that data. As good as all that sounds, this system rocks out the gate with a price tag that is going to put some of you off at $2,000 to $2,100 nicker, depending on your dollars, your pounds, your tax, your logistics. That's a lot of money. So, is this thing up to task? Is this going to deliver? First, let's talk about the design and the packaging there outside. And I think it would be fair to say that QNAP are going for the Mac user here. Notwithstanding the fact they've changed the packaging for this to be more sleek, the fact that it's called a NAS book as well, an existing family that QNAP have had for a while, this packaging could not be more targeted towards Mac users if it tried. The almost one-to-one image there on the front, the clean, definitely they know they're going for the Mac editors here. Now, if we open up what's inside, we have got the system itself in this lovely little raised thing. Again, QNAP have never done that. On top of that, we'll pop that there on the side. We have got our information and guidance and our guidebooks, details on the existing warranty this system arrives with. You can't even remove that little box there. So included with this is the following information on the warranty this device has. And again, you can extend it up to 5 years. First time installation guide there, and information on not only the setting the device up remotely, but the system also arrives, at least until I believe August this year, you can get 1 TB of cloud storage included with it, with QNAP's cloud platform. Now, everyone that orders a QNAP NAS you get access to their cloud platform. I think it's 15 or 16 gig you get for free, and you can sign up for lots of storage there, and it's actually quite competitively priced compared with some of the other third-party cloud providers out there. But I will say, this rolling out the gate with a terabyte of cloud storage as well to synchronize with your NAS, there's going to be a lot of Mac users, a lot of business users, and a lot of streamlined, I don't give a hell about gigabytes, terabytes, gigahertz and more, and I just want a thing that works, who are going to be very impressed by that. Now, alongside this, we've got an external PSU, because there is definitely no room in that box for an internal PSU, and it's a 120 watt compact external PSU, very compact indeed, I will say, for 120 watts. And on top of that, you've also got a Cat6, quite a high quality Cat6 Ethernet cable there included as well. That's your lot, that's all of your accessories inside that box. Let's get rid of that. I will say the power consumption on this is actually pretty reasonable. Given we're talking about a device that's running on M2 NVMe SSDs, the power consumption was always going to be quite modest, but given that it's got a couple of Thunderbolt 4 ports, that 10 GBE port there, and running those 5 M2 NVMe's at once alongside an Intel 13th generation i3 or i5 processor, I'm actually kind of impressed by the power consumption numbers, even with that CPU reported by QNAP's own pages there, which should be on the specifications, if not already on screen, then already shown earlier. And I like that it's a very compact PSU as well. Again, when you look at the size of the average QNAP PSU, and I can't really pull one from there, they're actually pretty chunky. So it's a decent little size, making this very, very portable as a device. And there's going to be users out there that, although they might use it stationary in their office and come back and forth, there will be other users that will take something like this on a job. Rather than taking a Thunderbolt DAS device, which only one user can connect with, this will allow multiple users to connect with it simultaneously, and therefore take advantage of multiple editing the same files, backing up, sharing the editing process, reinventing the workflow with the device on the go on such a portable system. But I think, other than that, the accessories there, one thing that I think is a glaring omission, particularly for in excess of a $2,000 price tag, where's the freaking Thunderbolt 4 cable? I get it, they included a lovely little Cat6, Ethernet cable for that 10G port, good for you. But for that kind of money, I want a Thunderbolt 4 cable, and I don't understand why they don't include one with it. And it's the same with the rest of the Thunderbolt 4 solutions from QNAP. This has got 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports. We're not talking a USB cable here. We're not talking Ethernet. Those things are dirt cheap anyway, and people probably have them knocking around in a drawer somewhere. People do not have USB Type-C Thunderbolt 4 certified cables knocking around in a drawer. These are not easy to get, and when you do get them, they are pricey. I've already spent $2,000, $2,100, $2,200 on this system. Seriously, QNAP, throw me a bone and include the cable. But apart from that, I think the accessory pack is well presented, it's well protected, and overall, you've got everything else you're going to need. But that's enough about the retail pack. Let's actually talk about the design of this thing. Fair play to QNAP. This thing is swish as F. It is incredibly compact for what you're getting here for a 5-base storage solution. They've done an incredible job of filtering in all of the ports in a very convenient way. So for example, the Thunderbolt 4 port here on the front, why is it taking that long for QNAP to roll out solutions that have got a front-mounted Thunderbolt port there? Almost all, with the exception of one, of their Thunderbolt-related solutions all have Thunderbolt on the back. And once you factor in the length of Thunderbolt 3 and 4 cables, generally you get to about 3 to 5 meters before either they are insanely expensive or it affects latency or are just flat out not available. A front-mounted Thunderbolt port makes all kinds of sense, and I can't believe it took them this long to do it. Alongside that, you have got USB 3.2 Gen 2 connectivity at the USB-A port there, and again, the Thunderbolt port there can be utilized for traditional storage. On top of that, on the front, there isn't any kind of LCD panel to give real-time information, but I will say you've got your one-touch copy button there, you've got your power button there, you've got LEDs that denote system access and activity of that copy drive there on the front. And although that front panel there is quite nice, it can be removed and it is lockable on the side, allows us to access those individual storage bays there. This system supports both QuTS, the ZFS platform, and the ext4 QTS platform as well, with their own inherent advantages in both apps and services as well. More on that later on in the software portion of this video. But I will say that these here on the front, these E1S bays here, are fantastic for two reasons. Number one, we've already sort of half discussed the whole hot swapping thing, but I love the fact that QNAP have rocked out the gate with adapters here inside. That means E1S is not established right now, pre-made E1S drives. It's not really mainstream, whereas M2 NVMe's are. And the idea you've got these adapters in here allows you to just go ahead. If we go over here with these WD Red drives that we're going to be utilizing in our review later on. These are WD Red SN700 drives here. It really is as easy as this to install them. Slot them into the available caddy there. We then use the click and load area at the top. And that's it. Our drive's installed. It's that straightforward. And now our drive's installed. We just slot it straight in there. Boom. We've now got our drive inside there. It's that straightforward, and with additional ventilation all the way along the top and space on these 9.5 millimeter height bays here, you can use compact heat sinks if needed on each of those individual bays. Now again, you don't have to fully populate. You can just pop in 1, 2, populate as you go. And thanks to both QUTS and QTS supporting RAID expansions, it means that you can gradually add more storage later on. And, you know, be rather creative with your budget for this if you want to go ahead and spend the bulk of the money on the system and only go ahead with 1 or 2 drives on day one and gradually add more storage as you need it. Now, as good as all that sounds, it is worth highlighting one of my earliest, and I would probably say one of the most damning negatives I found out about this device, which almost on its own stopped it being the ultimate NAS for me, as I mentioned in the introduction when I was debating, and that is these individual bays here are PCIe Gen 3 times 2. Now, that still means that each of these individual bays can achieve up to 2,000 megabytes per second, which is still damn good. You know, it's, you know, a considerable amount more than the 1 to 2, maybe 2,500 megs that the, you know, traditional hard drives can achieve, and maybe SATA SSDs can achieve 450, 500 megs. So 2,000 megs per slot is fantastic. And indeed, when you look at the performance numbers, with QNAP stating that this device fully populated, they did a populated version of this device using 5 of the SN850 WD Black SSDs. This system was able to achieve, look at my notes real quickly, 1,637 megabytes per second sequential read and 1,736 megabytes per second sequential write via a Thunderbolt port, and indeed that went up to 3,082 and 2,876 read-write respectively with 2 devices via the separate Thunderbolt ports. So why have I got such a problem with these M2 NVMe slots? Well, the CPU inside this system is a Gen 4 system. It's a Gen 4 CPU. That Gen 4 or a 13th generation i3 or i5 CPU, this should have the support of Gen 4 drives. Gen 4 drives achieve way higher performance numbers. The fact that QNAP included benchmarks with Gen 4 drives on their own pages, even though the system isn't Gen 4, is only systematic of that. Now, a Gen 4 drive that's separated onto a ×2 speed, that bifurcation in the back end would still result in higher performance numbers, but it's the fact that it's a Gen 3 ×2 that limits it down further. That means even when I'm utilizing these WD Red SN700 drives for later on in the software portion of this review, the 3,400 megabytes per second that these drives are capable of is going to be halved. We're going to be at somewhere between 15 to maybe 1,800 megabytes per second, but we'll learn more on that during the benchmarking. Nevertheless, it's still a great system and it's still going to give you huge performance, but there are going to be users like myself that are a little more tech-minded that are going to assume that this system would have rocked Gen 4 bays there, given that other Thunderbolt 4 systems from QNAP, such as the TBS-h574 and H674T respectively, both of those devices arrive with Gen 4 12th Gen Intel CPUs in i3 and i5 and they arrive with Gen 4 times 4 NVMe lanes. Now, I've reached out to QNAP on this, and when I have spoken to them, they have said that the reason that these are Gen 3 times 2 is largely down to separating lanes across this system and maintaining that CPU and its 8-core, 4-power, 4-efficiency architecture in the system. So, to put it into perspective, the Thunderbolt 4 ports, the 10GBE ports, separating lanes to the individual storage areas, all of that adds up. And by lowering them down to Gen 3 times 2, it allowed them to spread the hardware resources a lot further while maintaining this architecture. If they'd gone for a beefier CPU, you wouldn't have such a compact system, and it is about checks and balances. As good as all that is, and as understandable as it is, and as justifiable as it may sound, I'm still going to be a bit gutted that my drives that can do 3000 megs are only going to give me 15 to 1800 each on this system. It still means that internally, when you rate them together, great performance, but overall, that's kind of a bummer for me. But continuing the design, again, I'll leave this front panel off. The outside of this system utilises a brushed metal external casing here, and again, not easy to open this up. I'm not going to be opening it up in this video, that's for another video, but that metal outside is clearly going to be utilised for heat dissipation when the system is in operation. On top of that, the system has 2 rear-mounted cooling fans here, 40mm fans, and a base-level CPU fan, and indeed, the internal heatsink takes up the majority of that base panel there. The result is that although this is a NAS book, and it is the latest release in the NAS book series from QNAP, this is not a silent system. It's not crazy noisy like these, but it's not silent either, so do bear that in mind. It's going to be low noise, like laptop fan noise, but it's still going to be there, so just be aware of it. Heat dissipation and those fans together means, alongside those SSDs being Gen 2 speed, that general heat dissipation and average system temperatures are actually going to be very, very impressive for the scale there. Although I didn't get a chance to test this system quite yet with 2 Thunderbolt devices and an active 10GBE device there. But moving all slightly away from the design there, because overall I do really like the shape, the chassis, the design, what they've gone for, and the target audience there, although I'm not in love with the PCIe gen. Let's talk about the ports and connections on this, where things really do pick up. Now, we've already discussed the fact this system has that front-mounted USB port there alongside a USB Type-C Thunderbolt 4 port. And on the rear, we've got that other USB Type-C Thunderbolt 4 port. We've also got another 10 gig USB alongside a USB 2 port there, presumably for KVM reasons. Alongside that, we also have ourselves a sneaky little 2.5 gig Ethernet port and a 10 GBE network port there. Now, at least we've got that failover. I've talked about this in other videos before, and I've always been disappointed about users and brands not really adding 10 GBE to powerhouse systems that have got a huge amount of throughput, but then end up with a bottleneck for PCIe application and architecture reasons, or whatever. It's just sometimes not possible. But I'm really, really pleased that not only have they rocked out the gate with those 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports, but managed to make sure this has 10 GBE out the gate, when one of the chief criticisms from myself and others of their recent 74T series was that it rocked out the gate with Thunderbolt and not 10 GBE as well, because I think there's a lots of reasons, either for network pass-through or as adding another live editor to the same system, where that can be advantageous. Now, those USB ports can be used for external storage, can be used for a multitude of different accessories and adapters. They can also be used to add further network adapters, both 5 GBE and 2.5 GBE, both connected via USB there. Unfortunately, there is no PCIe upgrade slot available on this system. What you see is what you get. Now, there's also a range of QNAP USB expansions with hardware RAID on them, or simple JBOD that allow you to add further storage to this device for hard drives and SATA SSDs. Although they technically have a flash expansion, that does not connect via traditional USB, and therefore it can't be connected to this device. But at the very least, you can add multiple slower archival storage systems via USB to this. Also, the HDMI port there is HDMI 2.0. Oh no, it's 1.4B, I should say. It's actually a 1080p 60 frames, 4K 30 frames, and that is something to do with the CPU, by the way. But nevertheless, QNAP does provide an HD station or hybrid desk station parallel GUI that not only allows users to connect with this via the network, via Thunderbolt and via 10GBE and get their own graphical user interface that runs completely independent of anyone else, but on top of that you've got that HDMI output, which is its own parallel interface, controllable with a remote control, usable with your mobile phone, with a network remote control device, use a Bluetooth remote or a KVM setup if you choose. Now, let's talk about the Thunderbolt and 10GBE connections on this, because I think a lot of us want to know, ultimately, how can we connect with this? Because we've got the 2.5 gigabit Ethernet port there, so that connects to our wider network. It goes to another switch, it goes towards the internet, it goes towards the lesser connected devices. On the other hand, maybe we've got one Mac user who wants to go ahead and connect with Thunderbolt. Once they connect with it, it appears immediately on their system via Thunderbolt to Ethernet connectivity, T2E, and that Thunderbolt over IP connection alongside it is how you can connect with this device. It doesn't connect in traditional DAS, direct attached storage fashion. You will still need to connect with it utilizing IP or internet protocol there. So when you do connect with it, the setup is nowhere near as plug and play as a traditional DAS as mentioned, but you can still connect to it, and it will still be attached as a network drive, and you can use things like iSCSI LUNs. We've done a whole guide on setting up a Thunderbolt NAS for the first time, but that means one user can connect to this now via Thunderbolt. But it doesn't stop there, because then of course we've got our other connection. So now on the rear we've got another user connected via Thunderbolt. Now it gets better, because although one of them is Mac, the other one doesn't have to be Mac. It can be Windows if it chooses. This system will work as a cross-platform storage. Thanks to its own support and its own file system and own host control, it means that this Mac user can access the same data as this Windows user without having to pre-configure the storage. Both of them will be visible on their respective systems. But it doesn't stop there, because then you can use Thunderbolt to 10GBE adapters. That's right. If you wish, you can go ahead and connect this device to another Thunderbolt system and then directly connect an Ethernet cable, a standard network cable that I wish I had here in front of me. Hang on. You can go ahead, connect a network cable to this, connect that end to your Mac or Windows system, and then using the 10GBE port, boom. We've now got 3 editors working off this system simultaneously. Now normally, if this was a hard drive optimized system like the 674T or 874T or any of the Thunderbolt systems that came before it that were optimized on hard drives, that amount of storage equated to everyone and the performance of those hard drives just simply wouldn't be enough. However, thanks to the M2 NVMe's, there is enough bandwidth there for 1, 2 and 3 Thunderbolt connected editors to work simultaneously. And remember, if you've already got a 10GBE port, you don't even need an adapter like this. You can just go ahead and immediately connect a 10GBE port to a 10GBE port and connect directly. All of these mean that this system is ripe and ready to be utilized for multi-user editing of the same storage at once, while simultaneously network connected. Overall, the ports and connections on this, for what the architecture can do, is fantastic, and it makes it one of the best Thunderbolt editing solutions that QNAP have ever released. But now let's talk about that internal hardware. As mentioned earlier on, I'm not going to take this device apart. We've still got to do the software portion of this. We're going to be doing Plex testing and editing testing later on down the line for different YouTube videos. So I don't want to take this apart thanks to its rather layered heat sink and cooling system, I think it would be detrimental to those further tests. But I'll tell you right now, the CPU inside, either a 13th generation Intel i3 or i5 processor, is pretty darn good, with great integrated graphics on board. Alongside that, the i5 version that we have here arrives in an 8-core, 12-thread architecture, and that's 4 power cores, 4 efficiency cores, which will assign independently and can be burst, I believe, up to 4.8 gigahertz when needed. And indeed, the integrated graphics, phenomenal level of integrated graphics on this. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how this does with Plex, given its rather small stature there. One thing that I do find rather confusing, though, is the memory. The i5 version arriving with 16 gig of memory, and the i3 arriving with 12 gig of memory, both of which that memory is soldered to the board. That means you can't upgrade. Now, given that CPU can support up to 64 gig of memory, that's super annoying. Now, notwithstanding, as mentioned earlier on, the CPU architecture and how that affects the number of lanes and how the lanes are being separated in the chipset and how they may separate some of those PCI lanes by dividing them down and the times and lowering the speed, meaning that they've got more lanes to play with once they bifurcate them all out. I get it, but for the memory to be soldered to this board and limiting me to 16 gig when the ZFS file system needs at least 16 gig to do everything to the highest standard, it's just annoying. And I get it. Systems like this, generally more compact systems as well, generally always arrive with soldered memory. Give me more. Give me 32 gig. Give me 64 gig. 16 gig at that price tag isn't enough for me, and maybe it's a channel thing, maybe it's, you know, how that SoC version, the mobile version of that processor has been, you know, miniaturized down, has affected how much that can be done on this mobile SoC CPU, requiring soldered memory, or at the least allowing mobile memory to be the only way to separate that architecture as the only way forward. But then the i3 having 12 gig, what the hell is that? Nothing has 12 gig of memory. It's a weird number to start with. So I'm just really surprised at their position on the memory. I love that CPU, but the way it is being utilised in this system, I'm no techie in terms of that stuff. I'm sure they have done the best they can with that CPU, but I can't help but feel that if they'd gone for the 12th gen processor that is in the 74 series that we've already seen several times, that perhaps there were more options open to them. But again, without knowing the full spec and details, we can only, you know, hypothetically guess, let's be honest. But that aside, great CPU, weird decisions on memory, the internal architecture has clearly been designed with efficiency in mind. And at such a small stature, to have all of that hardware in something, you know, I would argue about the size of a Mac Mini, I'm really impressed with what we've got here with that level of storage and that amount of capability. But let's talk about what you can do with that. Let's go into the software, set this device up. I'm going to fast forward about 3 days, I think, right now, to get all the apps and stuff sorted and dig into this device and see its capabilities. So we find ourselves here on the desktop of my Windows PC, and I'll say right now, this system is being very, very responsive in all the tests that I did in the background and sort of looking at the software. But before we go any further, a few disclaimers we need to highlight. Number one, I am around about 1.5 feet away from the system. Hell, I can probably lift it up here and show it to you here on camera. The reason I'm doing that is later on in the video I'm going to be connecting this device via Thunderbolt there. So I wanted to make sure I was in close proximity because my Thunderbolt cable is only around 60 centimeters long. But that does mean you're going to get some idea of the noise this system can produce there. So if I bring the mic just a wee bit closer there. So right now the microphone is approximately 25 centimeters away. I'm just going to give you a good, let's say 20 seconds of noise. I think that'll do it, and more on top of that, if we make our way into the storage manager here on the system, what we can also do is show you what the system, trying to do a peak performance action just to show you what would happen on this system in terms of noise then. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and run a performance benchmark on one of the SSDs, and that will allow us to kind of push the system into doing some activity and get some more noise out of the system, or at the very least to hear those fans spin up a bit. As you can see, they're already on screen. I've done a benchmark. We've got 4 SSDs in a RAID 5 environment, and we've got 1 SSD in a single. That's so we can get some comparative data on performance. But if we go in and we select one of those drives and we run ourselves an IOPS performance reading, that's going to be quite intense. And what I'm going to do now is make, again, give about 10 seconds of silence to hear if the fans ramp up. So again, pretty good stuff there. I'll say right now, I'm quite happy with the general ambient noise level. You can definitely hear the fans. I think it's unavoidable on a metal chassis like this with 3 fans dotted around it. There's going to be noise, but it's certainly less than the majority of NAS systems out there. It's just not a silent NAS. Now, in terms of the applications and services, I've already done detailed reviews of both QTS and QUTS. These will be linked in the description, an hour long each, and they go through everything that's included with this software. I've also done dedicated videos on the surveillance software as well, via the HDMI output, via the mobile app, and via the web browser. And the same goes for a multitude of multimedia apps here. So although I'm going to skim over the top of everything, I have done dedicated videos on every single one of these applications and services, and I'll link to as many as I can in the description, or, you know, Google's your friend. But I'll say straight away, the storage manager on this is running lickety-split. Some of the advantages that are presented to you with the use of that ZFS file system, such as inline data compression, inline data deduplication, you know, are pretty darn good then. If we make our way in to one of the storage areas, such as this RAID 5 storage pool, not only can we, you know, on the fly choose on shared folders and shared larger storage areas how much inline data deduplication, compaction, and compression can be utilized there, but also on the fly we can find out just how much space is being saved at any time thanks to the utilization of those services. And the same goes if we want to go for the SSD lifespan kind of predictive failure, or at least selective failure. We can use that QSAL there, anti-wear leveling, and enable it selectively on different storage areas or selectively on different drives. Talking of the drive selection process there, as mentioned, I've got 5 drives there being utilized by this system, and within those RAID pools there, we've gone ahead and created one storage pool that's made up of 4 disks and one storage pool made up of the 1. I mentioned that earlier on. Now, we could rely on those internal benchmarks there, and again, while we're doing that, why don't we run ourselves a sequential read performance number there as well. But ultimately, you really want to see what the Thunderbolt performance is going to be. So let's go ahead and get our Thunderbolt cable connected in. This is a Thunderbolt 4 cable connected to the front-mounted Thunderbolt port of the system. So it'll take a wee moment to identify. Again, the cable here is totally in the way, and again, this is one of the kind of inherent disabling points about Thunderbolt connectivity, simply that the cables are just simply not that long. But we've connected it to that port, and in the background, while we're doing everything here, this system should mount itself shortly. That beep means that the cable has now been identified, and on the network connection here, we're going to be able to see that new Thunderbolt network connectivity, and as you can see there, it's now established and addressed. Now, we don't need to do it this way. If we were utilizing QNAP's own application here, we can see that already the QNAP has appeared here. If it doesn't appear for you, you can just go ahead and just do a rescan there, and it will appear on the local area network. It will scan the local area for a network identity and then a Thunderbolt identity there. So it will scan them as they go, it will find the device which it has done, and then from here we've got numerous Thunderbolt options we can go with. As you can see, this is a completely different network identity there, or alternatively, going back into that application there, we can go ahead and set up that 2TE, which allows us to access a wider 10 GBE network there, and therefore if we're utilizing the 10G port to an existing network, we can bridge that connection quite easily and quite successfully there. And again, connecting to this device via Thunderbolt for the very first time will allow you during the initial setup to map those drives there. But case in point, what we can do is go into the network drive sitting there, select the Thunderbolt option and go straight in, enter our login credentials, which I'm going to have to do, or simultaneously not disconnecting this cable, and log in there. And as you can see, there's my RAID 5 port and the RAID single, so we're just going to go ahead and map those in lovely and quickly. We'll call that one then R for RAID. Go in there for our RAID 5 connection. That's our RAID 5 pool. And exactly the same, we're going to go ahead and create that single pool there, map that network drive, maybe give it the letter S. I'm sorry if the camera's in the way of what I'm doing here on screen, but now we've got both of those equipped there, and we're able to see that on my computer there, we've now got access to those drives via the Thunderbolt connection there. It's that straightforward. So let's knock out some early performance numbers, shall we? Let's go into AJA and just get opened up there. And again, we're going to go for the RAID. No, we're going to go for the single SSD first. We're going to go for a 1 gig HD test file there. And as you can see, straight away, we're getting very high performance numbers there. If we go in for something a little denser, let's go for ourselves a little 4 gig file there. We're still getting 1000 megs via that Thunderbolt connection on that single SSD. Now, were we to be utilising an SSD that wasn't being ever so slightly throttled down to Gen 3 times 2, we may see higher numbers there. But if we move on to the RAIDed pool there, the RAID pool is still giving us higher numbers, but not significantly higher numbers. But I will say they are sustained higher numbers there. Now, again, had we been utilising faster drives, had higher bandwidth at our disposal, or simultaneously utilising smaller access files rather than 1 gig, then the numbers would be higher there for us. Again, I think a lot of the numbers we're going to see here are going to be relative to Thunderbolt over IP, and obviously the file types and the file sizes that we are going for there of sequential versus more small incremental files there. Now, if we wanted to use test software, which we'll be doing in another video in more depth, such as Crystal Disk Mark or using Atto or even Blackmagic, we would need to take advantage of the iSCSI LUN architecture there, which will allow us to create kind of localized appearing storage, which is something we're going to be doing in a follow-up video there. But at the very least, it is genuinely as close as it can be to plug and play for Thunderbolt NAS utilizing this. I'm just going to disconnect that cable there and carry on talking a little bit more about the software. Now, the software side of things, I'll say right now, pretty much everything that's on offer from QNAP on their platform is possible here. The application center, that's just beeping to let us know that Thunderbolt connection has now been severed. If we go into those network drives, boom, they are disconnected there. We might just go ahead and lose those for us there because we're not going to need them. Now, as I mentioned, everything on offer from QNAP is available here. We've installed a bunch of apps, and ultimately, it's exactly what you would expect. So, for example, if we go into the backup and synchronization, you've got tools such as Hybrid Backup Sync 3 that will allow you to synchronize and backup between multiple locations. These can be cloud-based, these can be localized, these can be in the system, they can be two-way synchronization as well. As you can see, we can choose local NAS, we can use the cloud services such as utilizing that 1 TB of cloud storage if we choose that the system arrives with, but there's also support of numerous other cloud providers as well, and we can still use USB drives and NAS to NAS via real-time remote replication if we choose to. Now again, you can synchronize jobs across the system in many ways. Going back into the synchronization, if we choose to, we can go ahead and use QSync. QSync will allow us to create a localized storage folder on our PC or Mac system, as well as mobile devices, that is synchronized using our own file explorer based on your PC. So with QSync here, it will allow you to synchronize with different NASes and not have to use the NAS user interface. You would just go ahead and use your own native OS, and in the background it would all synchronize. And you can do that with team folders or existing shared folders on the system. Indeed, the system arrives with its own comprehensive file explorer built into the web browser, as well as via mobile applications too. And the creation of shared folders includes everything you're going to need. So if we just go ahead and type that there where we want it to be, enabling snapshots. Next, we can choose whether we want to utilize all of the benefits of ZFS, as well as write once, read many, to ensure data isn't deleted by things like ransomware or erroneous or just error deletions, which, you know, we're all bloody human. On top of that, you've got things like box safe that you can synchronize with Office 365 and Google Workspace in a native fashion to them. Or you can use things like the Mars or Multi-Application Recovery Service to synchronize with third-party server tools such as Google Photos and WordPress databases and synchronize that data locally to the NAS. There's lots of options there open to you, and again, I could go through loads of them here. It would take ages. I recommend you checking them out. Top of that, we've got support of things like Tailscale, support of things like TeamViewer, lots of third-party applications supported as well. And moving forward from that, we can go into the entertainment section. Entertainment, they've got their own music application, they've got their own video application that includes metadata scraping, and as good as it might sound, it's still never going to be as good as Plex. But luckily, Plex runs on this thing like an absolute dream. When we look at Plex on this, and I've already done some provisional testing, and yes, there'll be a dedicated Plex video on this. We've had this thing testing up to 8K multimedia. So for example, if I go ahead and play this file here, we can see, open it up there at the bottom, we're converting this file here, we're absolutely running it through like a dream there, and we can go ahead into we can minimize this video here, go into the server settings, find out a little bit more information about how the system is doing there on the dashboard. As you can see, we are converting that file there in the background beautifully. But again, hardware transcoding is going to have to be another leg up from that. But things like the AI photo recognition are rolled in here that allow you to upload decades of photos and then use the internal AI to not only identify faces and start naming people, so we can go ahead straight away, give this person a name, and boom, every time we upload a photo of that person, they're going to be included in there. And there's lots of stuff such as utilizing AI photo recognition for things, such as, for example, although we've got only 12 boxes here on the left at the moment, we can break down even further. So selecting food will then break down into different kinds of food. Is it perfect? No, that's definitely not a carrot. But this is still based on a not dissimilar AI methodology as found on the likes of Google and more. There's no way that QNAP have developed their own AI. They're clearly using a third-party one, but at least it's included there. And all of this wrapped around applications such as the Multimedia Console tool from QNAP that allows you to micromanage all multimedia indexing, thumbnails, transcoding and more from a single interface, choosing where you want things to have access to and where you don't want them to have access, managing and timing indexing, thumbnail generation and more, all of which from that single interface there. Now going back into the tools here, we can look at the utilities. There are so many utilities for us to play with here. For example, QFiling will allow you to automatically move legacy data or old, warm to cold data automatically in the background of your system, as well as using something like QSearch to intelligently search the system and, with the benefits of AI, find data on your system right the way down to the text level very quickly indeed. And with that AI recognition built in as well, it actually evolves beyond the text level too. Now, on top of that, with all of those recognition tools and all of that background stuff, we can talk about virtual environments for those that want to run virtual mini server environments, mini desktop PC environments, ultimately running lots of roll-backable virtual computers rather than the physical. You can go ahead with something micro like a container and use Container Station, which has access to several container-based repositories, and start running them immediately from the app. Alternatively, you can head into Ubuntu Station. Ubuntu Station allows you to download within 3 clicks the latest version of Ubuntu to run either via the web browser as a VM or connecting a keyboard, video, mouse. Directly use this as a standalone PC. But moreover from that, for the enterprise users, you have Virtualization Station, which is a full comprehensive business class VM tool. This allows you to not only download and create your own virtual machine environments easily, as well as import and convert existing VMs like VMDKs and stuff into more usable environments. But on top of that, they've got access to their own VM marketplace, which, although has recently stopped providing the Windows ISOs, which is a real shame, there's still quite a lot there to play with on your NAS. Now, security is going to be something of a question for users. We did allude to Deadbolt a little while ago in the videos, and I think right now QNAP have tightened things up. They've made sure that things like Telnet, SSH are disabled by default. The admin account is disabled by default, so when you go into user settings, you actually have to go out of your way in many respects to make the system unsafe. Also, when it comes to updates within the system, so feature updates, security updates and more, these have now been improved upon how they are relayed to the end user. So for example, whereas before it was, do you want to do updates or not? Now you can actually say, I want critical updates, so security only, you want the quality updates, features, and you can then choose whether you want those to be automatic or manual in a far more incremental way than you could before. And one of the barriers that stop people updating so regularly is much like updating from Windows 7 to 8 to 10 to 11 or Service Pack 1 to 2 to 3 was the change it might happen to the apps and the locations and the usability of things that people would experience. It's the same reason that you as a Mac user probably been told by your Mac OS system to do that update. We're all human. On top of that, when we go back to the control panel there, we can talk a little bit about the security advisory. The security advisory tool allows you to micromanage all of the security of your system from a single interface. You can run antivirus checks regularly, you can run a malware remover, or use QFirewall to manually change the firewall settings either manually or automated pre-made profiles that will lock out or predefine your firewall for you if you're not so tech savvy. Moreover, from that, you can run the security scanner, which will check all the settings on your system from weak passwords to slightly, let's just say, questionable PHP decisions with third-party applications that you may wish to install. On top of that, it will also check if SSH is enabled at any point or if remote access or any failed attempts have happened. All of that can be done automatically on a regular schedule or ad hoc when needed. Even things like two-step authentication or using passwordless login with QNAP's own authenticator application are rolled in here. But of course you can use existing third-party OTP tools if you choose to. Ultimately, QTS or QUTS is still running as good as it ever was. And I would say on this system is particularly responsive, being based on or at least localized on the SSDs there, which is obviously going to improve the response time from it. It has improved over previous revisions and it does feel a lot more responsive. There are still design inconsistencies between apps, with some apps looking considerably more dated than others, and I think things like the HD Station HDMI output or the surveillance application QVR Pro and Elite could stand to see some refreshes in the design as well as some of the responsiveness being improved upon. But the rest of the features and services are pretty much as good as they have ever been, and there's a good balance drawn between first and third party tools, applications and services. Now I could go into way more detail, but as I mentioned, I recommend you check out those full reviews that I did, and I will be doing a separate performance benchmark video on this soon. But for now, let's head back into the studio and conclude today's review. The verdict. I think it would be easy to say that right now this is probably one of the best, if not the best, Thunderbolt solution that QNAP have ever rolled out. The price tag is a little bit steep, more on that later on, but I'll say right now, for the sheer design, architecture and uniqueness of it, this is a solution that is going to be tremendously popular to video editors, and they know it. Notwithstanding that support of 5 M2 NVMEs via the adapters into those E1S caddies there to allow hot swapping and larger capacities, it's always going to be appealing. The two Thunderbolt 4 ports and 10 GBE allow a huge amount of simultaneous editing across platforms and file systems and operating systems to be made possible, and a lot of that comes down to that CPU, which, although has presented limitations in terms of overall architecture, is still great to have under the bonnet here, to have such a future-proofed and modern CPU. I believe it was even second half of 2023 that CPU arrived. So this is really early out the gate to have that kind of architecture inside. Also, it is ridiculously compact and portable. And I think for those that edit on the fly and have multiple on-site location filming going on that needs to be edited or needs to be checked to edit it through and backed up on the fly, this is going to be really appealing for you. Even without the internet access, network and local Thunderbolt and 10 GBE access is paramount on this. And don't forget, QNAP have rocked in with 1 terabyte of free cloud storage for a year with this, which is pretty bloody good if you're going for a solution here for editing, and to have a 1 TB safety net rocked in with it for that first year. Can't really argue with that. And the QTS and QTS software still runs really well on this, whether it's for multimedia, backups, business, VMs, or whatever. And with the benefits of all the extras that the ZFS file system brings into bear, it's still a great software NAS system. Nevertheless, those Gen 3x2 slots irk me. They really do. Even if it is necessary for reasons of PCIe, spread out across the whole system, of being curated about the specs and the chipset and the lanes afforded to that CPU, it just annoys me. As does that 12/16 gig of memory. Not any more than that. That's just annoying. The lack of a Thunderbolt 4 cable, annoying. And the fact, and I touch on this more, I think, in a video coming soon on the Should You Buy It, may already be live. The same price tag for this, you can get the TBS-h574T. That's the 6-bay Thunderbolt 4 system. If you weren't looking at just NVMe's, the 674T for, again, around 2,100 to 2,300, I think, max. So roughly the same price as this, maybe 200 nick or more. That is a 6 SATA-based system with 2 Gen 4x4 slots and 2 Gen 4 PCIe upgrade slots as well, and that has Thunderbolt on the front and back as well. It doesn't have 10 GBE, but you've got a lot of expandability there, and I think the price for this, it's QNAP's own fault for creating this Thunderbolt NAS economy, and I think this doesn't sit very well within that economy once you weigh it up against things at the same price tag. Also, I think there's a lot of users that are going to this thinking this is silent. And it isn't. It's got the 2 fans, it's got a base level fan, and obviously when it's busier, the fans will kick in more, but ultimately it is not a silent system. And I think there are users that are going to think it is that need to be aware of that. Yes, you've got heat dissipation on the metal panel. The fans are small, they are very, very low noise fans, but we're talking about 5 NVMe's in a very small system with a very powerful, capable CPU. Those fans are going to go on, you know. And finally, we've got to say it, Deadbolt. QNAP are still, you know, sucking their wounds a little bit over the Deadbolt ransomware attack that happened approximately 1.5 to 2 years ago, depending on when you're watching this. And although they have made huge improvements on their operating system, huge improvements on the apps and security defaults, and huge improvements on the security updates of their system, how they're updated, how they're incrementally updated as well, so you can only choose security if you choose, only choose feature to stop those users that don't want to do an update in case it breaks any of the stuff like a Windows 7, 8, 10, 11 update would. Nonetheless, until a good 5-6 years go by, we always have to talk about it because, much like ASUS, much like TerraMaster, they were hit by Deadbolt. And although they've made improvements, we can't let that go yet. Much like Synology with SynoloCker, we talked about that in 2013-14, but that's been a decade ago now, and they learnt their lesson from that. So we just hope that QNAP do as well. But if you're not going to be using remote access anyway, and you've got your right firewalls in place, and you know what you are doing, you've got a network system admin, you're only going to use local stuff, and you rely on QNAP's updates that have happened thus far, none of that should really matter to you. And ultimately, as long as you get your backups in order, this is still a fantastic system for the mobile working editor, or even a static cross-platform editor that really wants to push things to the max. This is still one of the best, if not the best, editing Thunderbolt NAS I've ever seen. And thanks to the use of M2 NVMe's, it makes it unquestionably the fastest QNAP Thunderbolt NAS in the market right now, even when you're running multiple editors at once. Thank you so much for watching. There should be a written review and the links to the Should You Buy article and video below. There's also links to where you can buy this at Amazon and some other retailers. If you're going to go to those retailers anyway, please use those links. It results in a small fee coming back to me and Eddie here at NAS Compares. It's just us here, and it allows us to keep doing what we do. Other than that, if you need more support, use our free advice section, the big blue button on the right-hand side of every page on NAS Compares, along with the NAS Finder as well. There's also our Discord, and there's also our Ask.NAS Compares community forum. Alternatively, use our Ko-Fi or Coffee or Patreon pages for not only access early to a lot of the videos that we do here on the channel, but on top of that, expedited support, Zoom consultations, and access to our membership tiers where we do monthly Zooms and exclusive content and polls there too. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.